All right. Well, welcome to the Microdesk webinar series. My name is Megan Fuligar. I'm the marketing manager here at Microdesk. Today's webinar is about building an effective workflow with Autodesk Infrastructure Design Suite. The Autodesk Infrastructure Design Suite is a comprehensive solution that fully integrates infrastructure with the BIM process. The latest 2014 release provides even more access to tools that can help civil engineers and planners to more effectively collaborate through the project delivery process. In this webinar, Rick will show you how to create a more effective workflow that enables you to take advantage of all the tools available in the suites, including AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Navisworks, and Infraworks, in order to work more efficiently and generate truly impressive results. So a little bit about Microdesk. Microdesk is an Oracle Gold, Google, and Autodesk Gold partner. We are also an authorized training center. We have 11 offices nationwide, and that includes 90 consulting specialists and software developers. Presenting today's session, we have with us Rick Reed, our senior consultant of infrastructure here at Microdesk. Rick is a registered professional land surveyor in Massachusetts and has over 30 years of experience in land surveying and civil engineering. He is currently the technical lead for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and assists all Microdesk clients with the adoption of newer technologies such as BIM, 3D modeling, and mobile applications. He's been using Autodesk products dating back to 1983 and has expertise in all facets of the Infrastructure Design Suite. Just a few logistics before we begin. In order to minimize any background distractions, you are all on mute for the duration of the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question area of the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. Rick will address as many questions as he can at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, we'll provide you with our contact information so you can follow up with us. And so now, I turn it over to Rick.
Oh, thank you, Megan. Well, it's good to be back. Hopefully, some of the attendees here have seen and heard some of our past webinars. And hopefully the information that we can provide today will be helpful. As most of you might have already seen or heard, the Autodesk's transition from Map 3D and Civil 3D users in through the Infrastructure Design Suite certainly has a huge advantage to those of us who are kind of getting into certain areas. Hopefully everything that we show today will kind of get you a little bit more information and also get you a little bit more productive in some of those small areas. So to describe what we're really referring to, it's the Infrastructure Design Suite and the suite of products. Currently the IDS, as the acronym possibly used, comes in 3 different packages. The groups, these stand for groups of products. We ultimately have quite a plethora of information included in each of these suites themselves. New for the 2014, you might recall that in years past, Infrastructure Design Suite was originally released last year for the 2012 and 2013 products. And then ultimately, this year, they've actually expanded the information and products that are included in these packages. New, for example, you might have heard some talk about the new product recap. You might have heard also about utility design. And of course, now what they've actually done is started passing along some of the Revit tools to us on the civil side, as well as a couple of really slick modules, add-on modules that in years past were little plugins. Now they're included modules. So to start off with, the standard Infrastructure Design Suite includes the core products, what we like to refer to as kind of the platform for a lot of infrastructure design. And more importantly, this kind of delves into building information modeling, BIM workflows, ultimately getting a little bit more out of the projects we work with and also to expand our capabilities. Standard includes a full release of AutoCAD, Map 3D, Navisworks Simulate, raster design, as well as that new product, Autodesk recap. When we jump into the premium, when we jump into the premium, not only does it include those core platform products, but it also includes products like Civil 3D, 3ds Max Design, Infraworks, Utility Design, and Revit Structure. But it also includes additional modules, for example, the Geotechnical Module, the Rail Layout, as well as the Bridge Module. As we delve into the Ultimate is pretty much the carte blanche. Pretty much it includes everything in the standard and premium versions, as well as rather than Navisworks Simulate, it also upgrades that to Navisworks Manage. We also get the full suite of Revit tools, as well as Robot Structural Analysis Professional, and we add on 2 new modules, which are the Roads and Highways module specific for Infraworks, and also the River and Flood Analysis module for the Civil 3D product. Now, as we kind of discuss workflows, well, everything that we typically work with has to start somewhere, and the best example of that is ultimately platform, AutoCAD. Pretty much the vast majority of us probably work in some form of AutoCAD platform, utilizing the AutoCAD tools themselves. New for this year, the platform product has been expanded to include geolocation, also integration with live maps. Live maps, you might recall, is kind of their answer to our past Google Earth imagery functionality in years past. We also have the capability of utilizing point clouds and also share the data back and forth. We also have that Autodesk 360, which is ultimately the mobile applications, and the ability to share that data through whether it be other project team members, maybe even internal to your organization or external. Also the ability to share to a client who would otherwise not even have a version of AutoCAD. Share that DWG file or that data out to the cloud, as it were, and then provide that nice secure access for those individuals you wish to access those projects. And the simplest function is, we're dealing with a reality capture methodologies in today's world. Everything that's being passed along to us now certainly emphasizes we got to be able to use a lot of the existing data. So AutoCAD, certainly the phrase working with everyone is a perfect statement. The ability to work across different disciplines. The next step of that infrastructure design suite, raster design. Now, this is certainly one of those functions that I really don't stress enough that people don't take advantage of. In years past, people might have just kind of chuckled off raster design as just being something to convert raster files and converting raster to vector, and that was it. Well, I think really people have forgotten, and as a result, really haven't kept track of the things that we have available now, and more importantly, what raster design truly means. It's basically the ability to work with raster documentation as well as imagery. Now, we have to remember that we can import raster images. If we scan a plan and we need to convert that to a vector, we certainly have had that capability, and there's some pretty awesome tools such as followers, the polyline follower, the contour follower, the 3D polyline follower, these automatic functions that I think people have forgotten that that's a pretty slick little tool. And also images. I mean, bringing in ortho photos. As I usually joke in a lot of my classes and discoveries, when I work on a project and I go out to the state websites or maybe get a hold of some TIFF images or SID imagery for my project, you know what? It's fairly typical that my project falls in the middle of 4 specific tiles of these photographs, and as a result, we're forced to show a far more amount of data in that ortho photos than we really need to. Now, what we can utilize in raster design, most of us forgotten that raster design has the ability to cut and crop images and save those out. We also have the ability to create a world file, which is ultimately that correlation file, that TFW or SDW, for those of you familiar with TIFF world files and SID world files. The ability to crop that down, so instead of working with 4 16-megabyte files, we're actually working with one small 4 or 5 megabyte image. And also, the geolocation is, that's certainly key, because ultimately we can take a TIFF image that wouldn't be otherwise geolocated, move it to the right location in our project, and then ultimately export that TFW. Now it's geolocated. So the ability to make those files much more efficient. So raster design, certainly one of those things for conversion of existing plan data, albeit paper plans, or the conversion of the raster photograph information that we might obtain for our projects. So the idea there that raster design is just a stepping tool, well, this is certainly one of those tools that is usually forgotten. So. Now, as we start talking about photographs, certainly this day and age, we have two really important types of file data that we're starting to see more and more. We're actually seeing LiDAR data utilized or becoming readily available in majority of the cities and towns and counties across the U.S. USGS is supplying data, the states are supplying data, and also point clouds. I mean, ultimately by point clouds, I'm referring to scan data for projects. More and more organizations are getting deeper into it. The equipment's definitely becoming cheaper and cheaper. My last discussion with one of my local resellers, geez, I can get a small scanner for about $40K. Now that's certainly grossly different than what we were originally led to believe in years past, where you could be expected to spend $150,000 to $200,000 for getting into scanning. So, and not to mention that if there's any surveyors on the webinar today, that Leica as well as Topcon and Sokia have just released total stations that now perform small scanning. So we have this new tool called Recap, which is ultimately, as the term implies, recapturing that data, basically being able to utilize reality capture data and then start to clean it up, maybe bring it in, organize it a little bit, visualize it. So instead of just a bunch of point data, we have some information available a little bit cleaner, instead of just seeing a billion dots. And the idea is ultimately to export this data so we can utilize it more readily inside of AutoCAD or Civil 3D or Revit. One key component that we want to make for the 2014 products, originally our threshold was about 2 billion points. That has been expanded to 20 billion. So you can see in this particular capture here where that certainly makes a difference between certain aspects of the level of complexity or the level of detail that you're trying to capture. So, one thing I did want to pop in is actually kind of show you some of the recap. Ultimately, this is a pretty standalone product, and I'll just go through the step of actually importing a file, scan file. It is pretty seamless. Capturing a particular file, pulling in this data, and then ultimately you can see that this particular capture data here of a project with a roadway and the way I navigate around, and then ultimately I have a couple of other tools such as if I want to modify the elevation intensity or colorize by elevation intensity or the way it was originally captured, certainly some tools. And we also have some nice cropping tools that allows us to basically limit the data down to a much more usable format. I mean, basically being able to clean it up, so to speak, based upon elevation or limit. So, huge little tool. So, and again, if you're getting that much more into scanning data, this is really meant to be one of the first steps. I mean, if you're getting into scanning, the first thing you're going to get hit with software. You can buy the piece of equipment, but ultimately, what type of software you're going to utilize to start using and cleaning up that data. One good thing about this is free. You're not spending $60,000 for software to just get it ready for use in Civil 3D. The next tool ultimately is Navisworks. Now, Navisworks for most users in the civil side would probably say, that's not for me. I don't do much collaboration. I would tend to disagree with that because ultimately Navisworks is definitely a collaboration tool, yes. A lot of our architectural side and MEP side disciplines really have been using Navisworks for some time and certainly have been taking advantage of it. Some of the new functions, we have model takeoffs, we have workbook capabilities, and most importantly is the clash detective. What I like to use about or describe about Navisworks, especially for us on the civil side, is if we're a Civil 3D user, this makes it easier to actually work with other products. Actually, I meant to switch over. Oh, come on, you. There we go. The ability to actually bring in different models. So, for example, as I launch Navisworks here, if I want to open up and look at my existing utilities, I can just simply pop in and actually look at my utility data. Now, the interesting thing here is I might actually be the contractor or the civil consultant working on nothing but drainage. Another organization is actually working on the sewer main or the like. So you have a couple of civil engineers or surveyors working on the same project. Well, the idea here is ultimately the ability to bring in the data, and I'll bring in some proposed utilities, and you can see how quickly and easily the data gets referenced in. It is literally a collaboration tool. But the idea behind this, now what most users of Civil 3D might actually do is they might actually take those Civil 3D networks and bring it into their design file. Well, I don't like that idea for one reason. It starts really dirtying up my drawing, and I take exception to that. I don't want to bring in those pipe networks, for example, or those surfaces. All I really want to do is merge them together and then look at conflicts, like a drainage line hitting a water line, or gas lines which actually cross or interfere with other utilities. Now, the idea here is it's collaboration. It's working together, and this is ultimately building information modeling. I mean, this is that next step in I'm doing my design, and I want to see how someone else is actually performing their design, and actually see how it affects the design together. Now, this is a huge advantage if I show this to a client and explain, the challenges that are going to be incurred by putting in that water line without reviewing it first. So, just the cost of this catch alone could save hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost productivity on the job site. So, and your client would certainly learn to appreciate that. So ultimately, as we kind of dabble in, Navisworks, another one of those part-time tools as part of our workflow to verify that our designs are not conflicting with other individuals' designs. And we do have the ability to bring in Revit models as well. Now, as we kind of move along into some of the more advanced tools here, like which are included in the Premium Suite, we have 3ds Max Design. Now, this is typically referred to as a virtualization and animation tool, but I would emphasize that there's really some great things that you can do with this. It certainly gives you the ability to show a project in action, be able to communicate to stakeholders and permitting authorities in a much more clear fashion. How many times have you sat before a town or an approving authority and ultimately with 2D plans, two-dimensional plans, flat plans, and it seems that they just don't get it? Well, the idea behind this is you can actually throw things together and ultimately demonstrate how you're going to perceive that project. So, for example, in this instance, we have a project that was going to build a bridge over an existing commuter rail. Now, what this demonstrates here is how the construction sequence was going to be handled. So this particular client is trying to demonstrate that we're going to actually bypass the traffic flow, build things in certain steps and sequences, manage the traffic in a much more realistic form, and then when we get to certain points in the design, or I should say the construction, we'll actually bypass the traffic flow a little bit, and here you can kind of see how a video really does do it justice. I mean, using a 2D set of plans really doesn't kind of explain exactly what you're doing. Like, we're going to shut the road down, put in the bridge deck, and then we'll ultimately open up the traffic to a 2-lane roadway before actually finishing a few access roads, and then fixing up the roadway, putting in appurtenances like street lights, opening up to traffic, and then ultimately showing them, okay, this is exactly what you're going to do. Once it's built, now keeping in mind this is prior to construction, once it's built, we're actually going to just drive down the road, and this is exactly what you're going to actually see. I mean, you're kind of getting into a story, to explain that, look, this is what's going to happen with this new flyover. This new bridge is going to impact your particular area in a huge fashion. So, as we kind of discussed 3ds Max Design, I mean, ultimately this is taking a civil 3D file, a corridor, and then importing it into 3ds Max Design using the Civil View tools. Again, all of this was just ultimately built in Civil 3D and then just ported over to Civil View inside of 3ds Max. Now, as we kind of tie into Infraworks, the next product in that premium suite, we have to emphasize one thing. The original tag on this product was the Infrastructure Modular product of years past. It was kind of portrayed as a conceptual design tool. Again, I don't like that idea or that term because it really sells it short. The idea is this is literally the ability to bring together GIS data as a start. Conceptual design usually is going to start somewhere. Perhaps some surfaces that you might have from the GIS, and then bring that data in and actually throw in some really default photorealistic rendering. Now, the idea behind this, lighting effects, realistic water, animated clouds. It does support point clouds. We also have the ability, and this is one of the things I'm going to demonstrate here, is the ability to create storyboards. And then ultimately, if you create a storyboard, which is ultimately just a video, publish this to the Infraworks 360, which is, again, another one of those cloud-based services. But ultimately, what I like about this Infraworks 360 is the ability to access this through iPad. The idea behind this is ultimately kind of putting this sequence of events in motion here. I have a project, and I want to try to demonstrate exactly. Now, this is actually a series of 7 screen captures. I didn't perform a fly-through. I actually did some titles and captions in here. The idea here is the storyboard has the ability to create videos, and basically when you pull screen captures and then link them together within the storyboard, it performs the fly-through for you. So ultimately, screen capture number 1 showing the southern portion of this particular building, as I play it, it knows where the next frame is, and I throw up a caption here, and ultimately it gets to a certain point. That's my second frame right there. Throwing these storyboards together, and then ultimately, demonstrating the compelling component of your project, which is this is what I'm going to actually do. Perform a building expansion or propose some new roadways, whatever. So the Infraworks 360 provides the ability to take a mobile application like Infraworks 360 on an iPad, and then ultimately bring that to your municipal meeting, and then have not only this storyboard play for the users at the municipal meeting, but also, more importantly, they can fly through the model as if they, a video game. So, cool little tool. It's certainly another one of those workflow functions that, as we kind of describe this in a conceptual stance, I also look at this as a post-design or permitting. I mean, ultimately, once you've got the design done in Civil 3D or AutoCAD, bring that data back into Infraworks through the Civil 3D export. We have a new file format, which is a Infraworks export function. So we can, not only can we actually take an Infraworks proposed design model and throw it out to Civil 3D so my designs start ahead, but I also, once I'm done with design, I can send it back to Infraworks for this type of rendering. Now, keeping in mind, this is not 3ds Max design. This is actually just the tools contained within your Infraworks, which again is included within that Infrastructure Design Suite Premium suite. Some of the other concepts that are available in the Infraworks tools are certainly the ability to bring in Revit models. So if you're actually working with architects who also would like to pass along their data, if you get their Revit model, you can actually incorporate that into your designs inside of Infraworks as well. And there's also some really great level of detail settings, so you can show the level of detail that is important to the video. For example, you don't necessarily need to see plugs and interior walls and switches and such like that. We can go to a lower level detail where we see doors and windows and things of that sort. And then also with the Ultimate, we have the ability inside of Infraworks to also utilize the Infraworks 360, which is the ability to, for roads and highways module, to edit some of that design inside Infraworks and also throw it up to the cloud. The next slide here, we have the profile optimization report. This is part of that Infraworks 360. The thought of being able to throw a conceptual design up into the cloud into a optimization tool, which will allow you to analyze that particular project based upon certain characteristics that you input, like construction costs, assembly widths, things of that nature, to kind of get a more realistic idea of, well, is this a truly viable project, or is there a quicker, better design in there? So. Now, ultimately, the workflows kind of tie back into also the analysis. I mean, ultimately, some of the analyses that we're asked to perform for certain projects. The new river and flood analysis module is ultimately the ability to automate those HEC-RAS cross-sections. I mean, you've got a surface available to your particular project, but now you've got to perform analyses. And new with the Ultimate Edition is the add-on for river and flood. So. One other component that used to be on labs, which has actually been migrated into, and it is referred to as the Geotechnical Module. It's really meant for borehole data. What I usually kind of explain this to is subsurface information that, most if not all of us in the civil side have to deal with on time to time, whether we work closely with a structural engineer or not, or a geotechnical engineer or not. More oftentimes we might do test pits. And this is basically what I like to point out is it's another key component of being able to work with subsurfaces. So if you have elevations of your surface and then ultimately have locations of the subsurface locations for contamination values, soil types, water elevations, we can actually import that data and then analyze and document them. It's the method of automatically creating subsurfaces beneath our existing condition surface. And that's one of the reasons why the term geotechnical module, it is definitely below ground. Geotechnical is the focus and the main reason why it's here. But I like to expand upon that. This is another key component of analyzing the data in your design. So if you have subsurface data, typically we're going to get it in point data form anyway, and we can utilize that data and have Civil 3D work a little bit more intelligently. One other component new this year is, of course, the rail layout module. Now, certainly a lot of the transportation bills that are coming out, rail is certainly an important part of that. Not only correcting some of our infrastructure, but also designing new railways in order to facilitate the transportation bills out there. We have this nice little rail layout module, provides us the ability to create more accurate alignments, define turnouts. It's not to say that everybody does rail work, but it's nice to see that our transportation characteristics in Civil 3D are expanding. And then ultimately we have the bridge module, which the bridge module really was originally designed to share models between Revit structure and Civil 3D. Now, a lot of our structural engineers utilize the Revit structure tool in order to design their piers and abutments. But ultimately, this is really meant to provide that interoperability between both the transportation designer and also the bridge designer. So the nice tool contained within Civil 3D actually does afford you some small components in order to perform bridge design. I won't say it's not going to do structural analysis of that sort. That's certainly left to the Revit structure tools, but it does give you the ability to work with the tools interoperability between Civil 3D and Revit. So we perform a grade, line and grade for a proposed bridge and create that quote-unquote model of that bridge, and then be able to send that out to Revit structure for the structural engineer to perform their analysis, revise what they need to, and then ultimately send it back to us. So ultimately, that model gets updated back in our Civil 3D model. So our cross sections will update, our profiles will update with that physical model. Basically, the idea of bringing together civil and structural engineers, even though we're pretty close as it is. Now, new for the 2014, and I kind of emphasize regarding our workflows, is the 2014 version interoperability capability. This capability is ultimately means that if I perform a design inside Civil 3D 2014, I can give that to anyone running Civil 3D 2013, and ultimately they'll be able to open it up and see all of our models as if it were created inside of 2013. Now, this has actually been a huge wish list for years. Dare I say, a long time. The ability to work with multiple versions and not have to dumb something down, as it were, in order to allow your user or your client or other stakeholder access to that. If products like 2012 and earlier don't enjoy that function, this is certainly one of the huge advantages. So now 2013 and 2014 can work together. There's only a few characteristics that are not translatable, and that usually refers to small components or expansions of a model that were not available or invented in 2013. So instead of being abandoned, like prior versions had accepted, now it's just ignored. So the extra components contained within pressure networks, for example, are just ignored. So even though those components are ignored, the pressure network is still relevant inside 2013. So, huge advantage. So with that, I could probably open up to some questions, perhaps. Let's see. Kind of covered a lot of data here. Certainly a lot of great information available within the products. I can open it up to questions. Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat window. Let's see. Yep, no questions. So ultimately, what I would probably like to pass along is ultimately, if you do have any questions regarding this particular webinar or anything that I might have said or demonstrated, certainly I'd like to offer both my own email as well as our default email, webinars@Microdesk. You can certainly access my email. Matter of fact, I'll throw it in here as well, just for giggles. Because certainly I love the idea of answering questions. Oh, there's one good question. Interoperability with Microstation, great question. As most of you might be well aware, back in 2008, the two big bullies, I like to refer to them, Autodesk and Microstation, or Bentley, actually locked themselves inside of a conference room and emphasized that, you know, we got to definitely play better with each other. So with each subsequent release, and it kind of continues with the 2014 products, we utilize the capability of being able to work back and forth. We do have the Dgn Export capability within Civil 3D and AutoCAD. We have a new function reference when we're exporting the Dgn file. We can actually utilize seed files. For those of you in Microstation, you're familiar with the seed file reference. Basically, think of it as, for the AutoCAD users unfamiliar, think of the seed file as like a drawing template for the Dgn file, you know, setting units and such things of that nature. So, you know, the objects that we do create, we do have the ability to pass them off to Microstation. We do have a couple of different functions of using Dgn files. We can not only import them, so we turn them into AutoCAD vector data, and most of you who've messed with Dgn files in the past might remember the map import function, which performed that. And we also have the Dgn underlay. So instead of bringing it in as AutoCAD line work, we can actually bring it in as an underlay, sort of like a backdrop. So we don't have to physically bring that data in. So hopefully that kind of quells some fears about Microstation use. It's certainly one thing to recognize, like Caltrans, good example. They're not afraid of it. They're certainly a Microstation user right now. A Microstation deliverable, I think, is still, I hate to date it, I want to say 2014, 2015, I think they have the requirement till. But right now they are actually going through Civil 3D training. So in particular, each of the different districts are already recognizing that utilizing Civil 3D in concert with their Microstation is going to aid them in not only working with more and more consultants, because keeping in mind, I'm from Massachusetts. Massachusetts Department of Transportation has never been a Microstation user. They're AutoCAD, so I'm kind of have the ability to work with a lot of different DOTs. I know Connecticut is a Microstation, Vermont, New York, Maine are also Microstation. So we certainly have the ability to utilize Civil 3D in their design too. So hope that helps. Any other questions that might pop up? Oh, got another good question. Hydrology and map capabilities. Absolutely. Ultimately, the Civil 3D product is built right on top of the map 3D engine. So dare I say a value, but most, if not all, the current capabilities of map 3D continue to be offered inside the Civil 3D product. There's only, I hate to even mention it, but there's probably one or two particular components that were impacted by the map and Civil 3D interoperability. But ultimately, all the map tools are there. And the hydrology, we still contain and enjoy the storm and sanitary analysis, what I like to refer to as our hydro professional tool. And then we also have the IntelliSolve or the hydrographs extensions contained and inside of Civil 3D. That's the Hydro Lite, dare I say. So those two components continue to be offered. And also, the one thing that I have to clarify to the hydrology tools themselves, regardless of whether you upgraded to Infrastructure Design Suite or kept your Civil 3D only, you still get those two tools. So choosing the Infrastructure Design Suite is not meant to prohibit you from accessing those storm and sanitary analysis tools. So hopefully that helps. Good question, David. Okay. Any other questions that people might think of? Alrighty. What we can do, certainly my email address is up here. Certainly check back from time to time for continuing webinars. We certainly have quite a few planned for the next coming year anyway. There's a lot of new and interesting things popping up. And certainly if anything that might pop up after this webinar and you have questions regarding interoperability or specific functions within tools, by all means, that's what we're here for. Just reach out to support@microdesk.com. That's our support link. Or you can always send me an email address, rreid@microdesk.com, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. So. At this point, I think I'll pass it back to Meg. Megan, you still on the line?